Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It is the Monday show. I'm Andrew Musgrove today, not joined by Aaron Stokes because he's off partying, but it's a pleasure to be joined by the Adopted Geordies podcast host, Andy Jaye, who's had a brilliant couple of weeks down at Wembley as well. We'll talk all about that. But first off, Andy, thank you for stepping into Aaron's shoes. How are you doing?
I'm very good, mate. Thank you. Big shoes to fill, so I don't anticipate any sort of level of brilliance, but I'm delighted to be asked. And as you already know, because we've run into each other a couple of times at St James's in the corridors, I'm a big fan, and I have been following you and your award-winning show for an extremely long time. So when you dropped a note saying, "Could I step in?" I was, to be honest, quite blown away. So thank you for having me.
Oh, very kind words. Thank you very much for sharing that. Much appreciated. We'll start, Andy, by just telling us a bit about Adopted Geordies, where the idea came from, and if our listeners and viewers haven't come across it, what exactly is it?
Well, it's a podcast. It's not a rival to you or any of the others that are already in the space because, of course, they're already brilliant. You know, yourself, True Faith with, their amazing team. The extremely brilliantly titled Pod on the Tyne, which is possibly the greatest title of any podcast ever. We have to kind of give them that. Also, they're great fun. The Blogcast lads and many others, they're already there. You're already existing. You're already catering to the fan base with your amazing insight and your access and your sort of speedy reactions to the matches and so on. But I sort of thought to myself, there's a chance to do something slightly different, a sort of more entertainmenty show that sort of celebrates people like me who have very, very close links to the team and massive love for the club, but are sorely lacking in the accent. It's the greatest sorrow of my life, to be honest, that I don't have a Geordie accent. I have Geordie parents, Geordie grandparents, and so on, but I wasn't born in Newcastle, which if I could have done anything about it, I would have been born in the Northeast. Therefore, I wouldn't have had to spend all of my formative years explaining to people that I was growing up with why I didn't support the local team and why I supported Newcastle United. But that's what it is. It's a podcast for people who love the club. They don't have to be from the Northeast to celebrate the team, to love the team. We've had many different people on the show now. We're sort of 18 episodes in, plus we have a sort of spin-off show now called The Huddle, which I do with Ryan Taylor, who's just absolutely top quality. I've had a couple of co-hosts on the Adopted Jordy's pod. For the first 10, it was Asim Chowdhury, who's Chabuddy G from People Who Just Do Nothing, and is hilarious and loves the club and great fun. And then when his diary got so busy that we just couldn't do episodes in the sort of frequency we wanted to, I was overjoyed to say that a guy who I basically had photographs of on my wall when I was growing up, Rob Lee, one of my captains, original entertainer, he's sort of taken over from Asim. So to have Rob Lee and Ryan Taylor and their company every week talking about Newcastle United, it's just absolutely amazing. And yeah, if anyone hasn't caught it, we've been really privileged. We've had the opportunity to talk to Eddie Howe and Jason Tyndall. We've had exclusive interviews with Alexander Isak, Bruno, Joe Linton. John Beresford's been on the show. We've had some celebrities like Gabby Logan, who's a friend of mine who I've known for years. James Bay, the musician, who's a massive Newcastle fan and a top guy as well. And we've got some really exciting episodes coming up, including one. If I can get it edited in time, Andrew, it's up to you, depending on how long we do this. If I can cut it together in time, then we'll have Jonas Gutierrez out tomorrow. Otherwise, it'll be Wednesday, and a few more to go before the end of the season. Warren Barton is one I'm particularly looking forward to sharing because he's hilarious and loads of fun, and the kind of interplay between him and Rob Lee is terrific. But that's enough about me. For goodness sake, this isn't to talk about us. It's to talk about the team and to celebrate all the amazing things that are happening in Newcastle at the moment.
Yeah, and there's a lot to talk about, but I did want you just to explain exactly what it is you guys do, because it's a tremendous podcast, and I think we are fortunate in many ways to have a podcast market from a Newcastle United point of view, which is very saturated, but it helps you, keep on your toes. It helps you always improve. And what you guys have done, I think, have spotted a little bit of a gap in the market and done something entirely different, but it works so well. And you mentioned the Isaac and Bruno interviews, and obviously Rob Lee there as well. I think what's brilliant about that is that And you handled it so brilliantly, because a lot of people in that position talking to Alexander Isak might find it a little bit, how shall we say, a bit starstruck, but it was a fantastic interview. So if you guys haven't seen it, I do really recommend you head over to the Adopted Geordies podcast and find it. I mean, what was that like, sitting down with Isak and a few of the stars?
It was, I mean, it was phenomenal. It was an unbelievable experience. Building up to being with them, um, I was really quite nervous because, as you sort of know, because of your journalistic brilliance, Andrew, you know, you only get one shot at these, and to have a door open like that, you know, you don't want to sort of, you don't want to blow it, and you don't want to make it, oh, look at me, look at me. You know, there's the difference between you and I is I'm not a journalist, so you know I don't get opportunities to meet these guys again. You know, you get invited to all the press junkets and you're there at all the media days and everything, so you know that you can have a set of questions to ask and then you'll get a chance to ask them again. Whereas for me, it's we do an entertainment show, it's lifestyle, it's fun, it's football. um, so I'm not out there searching for headlines. I'm just looking for a connection, trying to meet these guys as human beings who happen to play for the club that I've loved for my entire life. So yeah, when Isak, before Isak walked into the room, I was quite anxious because of what I considered to be the magnitude of it. But to be honest with you, man, once he came in, he was so nice. You know, as we were kind of setting up microphones and making sure the lights are right and all the rest of it, he was just lovely, and I sort of immediately felt very comfortable in his presence. Um, and this kind of ice cool persona that you see on the pitch isn't. I mean, you've met him before, Andrew. You know what he's like. He's a really nice guy. He's really friendly. He looks you square in the eye. He holds your gaze. He smiles in more ways than one. And yeah, he didn't dodge any questions. He was laughing around. Yeah, it was great. It was a real honor to talk to him.
Do go and watch the episode if you haven't managed to already. Just a reminder, this episode is sponsored by NordVPN, so do click the link in your podcast description box to get an exclusive discounted offer on your plan. It is well worth the money. It will just cost you as little as £2.34 to get yourself protected and support on the podcast. And Andy's already mentioned Ryan Taylor, but we are hosting a very special Q&A on Thursday at the Tyneside Irish Centre with Ryan and James Perch. So get your tickets. The link is in the podcast description box. Just £5, and the proceeds go to the Newcastle United Fans Food Bank. So you're supporting an amazing charity, and you're coming along to chat to two Newcastle United favourites. It's going to be a great evening, and you can kickstart the celebrations once again for the Carabao Cup success. Right.
That's going to be a great night, Andrew.
It
That's
will
going to be a
be.
great night. I tell you, I mean, I've spoken to Ryan about it because he mentioned to me that you'd invited him up, and as soon as he said that Pacino is going to be there as well, I was like, oh, the boys are back in town. I mean, I don't know Perchy, but obviously I've got to know Ryan quite well recently, and mate, he's just such a brilliant guy, such high quality. So, I mean, for £5 to go and spend the evening with those two, what a result! I mean, that's amazing, amazing. You're going to have a brilliant evening.
Yep. So if you've got your tickets, thank you very much for buying them. If you haven't, hit the link in the description box. It is going to be a fantastic evening, as Andy says, because there is so much to celebrate as well. It's not just Newcastle lifting the cup, which is primarily what we'll be celebrating on this episode and on Thursday, but Dan Burn playing for England. I mean, his story, Andy, getting the call up after going back to his boy club, after scoring the opener in the final, which they win after 70 years of hurt as well. It's been some fortnight for him, but then as well to play as well as he did against Albania on what day was it? The other day. I'm not a big fan of England, but I did watch it. But he's just had the best fortnight I think possibly you could wish to have as a footballer.
Do you know what? I thought that Joe Linton was the biggest fairy tale in our squad because of his transformation from the player he was and the things that we've seen happen to him in his early time with us, and people questioning the price tag and the position and whether he could score other than hitting his own face and so on. You know, all these challenges. His transformation under Eddie, thanks to Kieran Clark being sent off and Eddie being a tactical genius and seeing what could work and transforming him into this midfield powerhouse of brilliance. Unlike anyone else, I can't think of a single other midfielder in the history of the Premier League who is the same as Joe Linton. And you can look at most of our players and go, oh yeah, well, he plays a bit like maybe Roy Keane did or whoever it might be. Whereas with Joe Linton, I can't think of anyone before him. I kind of originally went to Patrick Vieira, but Vieira didn't have that level of I mean, forward thinking. Do you know what I mean? Because, mind you, the way he played at Wembley was something completely different. I felt like we saw a brand new Joelinton as well, dropping deeper than I've ever seen before, almost becoming part of the back four at times, which is, I think, is a new thing. Anyway, sorry, I'm going into tactical analysis, which wasn't your question, which is about Dan Burn. So I had thought that Joelinton was our big fairy tale, Eddie's star story. Nothing would ever trump that. But then, no way, step forward, he's from Blythe, big Dan Burn. I mean, just unbelievable. Do you remember when he came? Well, of course you did, because you've worked with the club forever. But when he first arrived, there was this kind of feeling that he was one of those stopgap signings. You know, we knew Kieran Trippier was coming in, established pedigree, really quality, bringing so much experience and class, and he would be a mainstay. He was straight into the team. He was going to be there forever. You know, probably end up with a coaching role at the end of it. He can retire here. But Dan Burn, everyone was kind of saying, well, that's like a one-season stopgap. That's to get us out of this relegation scrap. That's to pull our socks up until we can sign someone bigger. And Dan Burn wasn't taking that. Because we did sign someone bigger. We signed Sven Botman, you know, who everyone was purring over, who, by the way, is world class. We call him our Rolls Royce because he is. But Big Dan Burn wasn't taking it lying down. And he stayed and he grafted and he played his heart out. And nobody deserves what's happened to him in the last 10, 12 days more than he does. He is a man who typifies the resilience, the bounce back ability, everything that Eddie wants his team to be is personified in Big Dan Burn. He's a gigantic presence as a human being. He's a lovely, lovely man. Also, we've got to talk about his character, Andrew, because it's not just how he plays. It's who he is on and off the field with his teammates, but also with his fans. Remember when we had those amazing shirts for that one match, which were vibrating to help with the deaf players, with the deaf fans, rather. And Dan Burn is the one doing the sign language in celebration. You know, he's got the presence of mind to remember when we're celebrating. He's the guy that does that. He's the guy that does the mental health talks and talk about the importance of telling someone when you're in trouble, when you need help. He's just a huge, brilliant human being. So to then score that unbelievable goal, which is probably the greatest header in the history of football, was absolutely so fitting. I mean, I don't know how you felt, Andrew, but from where I was sat in the stadium, it felt like time slowed down. And that doesn't usually happen in football. You know, up he went. Usually time slows down because you can watch it on a screen in a replay. But in real time, with my own two eyes, that was a slow motion header. There was this giant who was about 10 times bigger than everyone else, leaping above everyone else, and putting this thunderbolt in, which he had no right to score because of how far back it was. Unbelievable goal, unbelievable scenes. Couldn't have happened to a nicer, better person. And mini fanboy moment for me. I was very, very fortunate, and I'm acutely aware of my privilege here. I was very fortunate to be back at the box park after the game with the players and their families and Eddie and so on. And I did have a quick word to Dan, and it was very lucky because I'd been standing near Alan Shearer, not because I was trying to be near Shearer, but just because that's where I was stood. And I was there when Dan and Shearer were having their chat, and I could overhear kind of Shearer telling him to retire and all the rest of it. And I just felt compelled because he was there, because we'd kind of smiled at each other earlier in the evening and all the rest of it. I was trying to kind of leave everyone alone because it's their celebration and I was just delighted to be there. But I had to go and tell him I thought he was brilliant and I was over the moon for him. And he was so class. He just kind of stopped and kind of looked me square in the face. And we had this lovely little chat. I won't kind of go into detail, but it basically involved me saying, "Wow, you're amazing. Thank you for everything you've done." And him responding with the nicest words back. And then we grabbed a little photograph, and it was just amazing. I couldn't not, because I thought, well, I'll never be here in this moment again. So as Janola told us in that brilliant kit launch, you got to enjoy the journey. Well, I was there. I got to enjoy it, so I did, and I hope that's all right. He seemed
Of,
okay with it.
of course it is, and you've got to take these moments. And you are right; he's just such a nice guy. You know, sometimes you meet your heroes and they're not as nice as you wish they were. But Dan is just so down to earth, and he's just living every Newcastle United supporter's dream, isn't he? And then to cap it off with an England cap, and when most people are maybe looking at retiring, and there he is with his first England cap, and the stats as well from the other evening: 153 touches, 99% pass accuracy, 14 passes in the final third, 7 clearances, 3 out of 3 long ball success, 2 out of 2 tackles won, 2 ball recoveries, and of course he hit the bar as well, nearly scoring again at Wembley. As debuts go, I think he did very, very well, and hopefully, he will be on the plane to the World Cup.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah, I mean, I like you. I watched his debut. I do follow England, nowhere near as closely as Newcastle. I don't care the way I do for Newcastle, but I do follow England, and I go to as many live games as I can. And I thought he was excellent. I was a little bit miffed afterwards, Andrew. I don't know if you've seen this, where some of the Southern press were, with their marks out of 10, were kind of scoring him quite low. And I saw one person giving him a 4 out of 10, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I would genuinely, I immediately questioned their ability to watch football at that score. He had 5 shaky minutes towards the end where he looked a little bit flustered, but it was still a clean sheet. Other than that, I felt he was flawless. I felt he was one of the better players on the field at the time. Really commanding performance. He is a colossus at the back. And I think Thomas Tuchel really likes him, you know. You don't pick him for no reason. You don't wheel him out in the press for no reason, which is what was all the build up was Dan, wasn't it? He was the kind of chosen player to go in front of the media. And yeah, I thought he did himself really proud. It'd be interesting to see if he plays tonight. I hope so, and I really, really hope he goes to the States because it would be just brilliant.
It would be such a fitting end to that kind of journey that he's been on. But you are right, and I had it written down here on my notes about the reaction from some of the nationals, and we'll not mention any names, but I think you, me, and most people watching and listening to this were a little bit put out. I don't think it's because of blind faith to Dan Burn because he's a Newcastle United player. I think it was just a genuine bit of confusion to what game they'd been watching. But it seemed
Mm.
right from the off that there were certain journalists from a national persuasion questioning why Dan Burn is there if he's good enough. And it's like, what are we doing? Are we wanting England to be a success? Are we wanting Dan Burn to be a success? Because some of the coverage seemed to suggest that actually we don't want this fairy tale ending. We want it to be horrible, and so we can write some questionable headlines. But anyway, at least we've got his back, as has everyone else watching and listening. But yeah, hopefully he can continue on the success that we certainly feel he had in his debut. And like we say, what a fantastic couple of weeks for him. Anthony Gordon, though, does go off injured. He has a hip injury, thankfully, but he will be suspended anyway for the Brentford game. So it's not an immediate need to have him back, and he'll have a bit more time to rest up. First off, just on Anthony Gordon, I mean, it must have been heartbreaking for him to miss out on that final, but he was in there in the celebrations and seemed to be enjoying himself. I guess, watching his teammates lift the cup, which of course he had a huge part getting Newcastle to the final, it'll just serve as that little bit of added motivation to get his head down and work even harder.
Yeah, do you know, it's an interesting one because he'll have obviously been absolutely gutted to have not played in the final, and who knows what's in his head, because we know he does all this sort of mental kind of programming of games and stuff, because he's talked about, he went on Gary Neville's pod, didn't he? It was really insightful about his process and how he's an alternative trainer as well in terms of his physicality, etc. But one of the things that he's made very clear many, many times is that he's from a family of Liverpool fans. His parents are Liverpool fans, his brothers and sisters, I don't know how many siblings he's got, but cousins and friends and relatives are all Liverpool, Liverpool, Liverpool. And we all know he had his head turned in the summer and then knuckled down and signed a new contract, which was, I think, brilliant for us. And I suspect and hope he's here for the long term. And I certainly hope this win will bed that in even more. But you do wonder if he was going to kind of play in the final, if history had changed things around and he hadn't been suspended. He might have had sort of torn emotions, not for a second suggesting he wouldn't have turned in absolutely everything for Newcastle, because he's not only a professional, I think he absolutely loves this club now as well. But you could imagine it would have been quite a confusing thing knowing that his family was sat in well, I would say the red half of Wembley, but you couldn't really see that from the stadium, could you? There was a black and white half, and then I'm not sure who the other team was playing was, but his family would have been there in the other bit. So that would have been a kind of strange thing. So he was kind of spared that in a way. You know what I mean? And actually, it gave an opportunity for, I think, somebody that has been the forgotten man for us because of how good Anthony Gordon's been. Harvey Barnes stepped up, and I thought he was superb. I mean, they were all superb because we won the thing. But actually, You know, after watching Harvey at West Ham, where he had some very good moments and some slightly wobbly, shaky moments, he really stepped into it. He really owned his position. And I thought he was great at Wembley. I'm not saying he was better than Anthony Gordon would have been, but we didn't miss for I think everyone was feeling we'd really miss Gordon. We didn't, because Harvey Barnes had a blinder. And I think that's really great that we had another opportunity, which is another thing we have to think about with that match, isn't it? Because the great thing after the game is there hasn't been any saltiness from Liverpool fans. You know, if it had been any other team, there might have been a little bit of uh, a little bit of sort of snipey, unnecessary nonsense from fans. But actually, Liverpool fans have been really class. They saw that we were the better team, and we were the better team who, on paper, also had lots of absentees. You know, no Anthony Gordon, no Lewis Hall, who has been unbelievable for us, no Sven Botman, who we know is such a colossus at the back as well. So we had a lot more issues than they did going into this. Yes, they'd been knocked out of the Champions League, but they were still playing their strongest available team, potentially bar the goalkeeper, but he was still a very decent keeper who was in. And so they haven't been like, oh, well, we didn't really want it, or oh, well, we only played this, that, or the other, or oh, you were lucky, because they knew we weren't. We were the better team. Sorry, I don't know how a question about Anthony Gordon has got onto Liverpool fans. Apologies for tweeting that, Andrew, but there it is. It's one of those things. There's so much to say on such a historic thing, isn't it?
No, there is, and you know we can praise the Liverpool fans for being as I guess polite and as kind as there have been. Other fans from other clubs have not been and have played down Newcastle's achievement, which I think is laughable. Particularly the red side of Manchester, because what they would give to be in Newcastle's position this season, they'd snap your hand off for it. But
Yeah,
on
they think they're going to buy Isak, don't they? That's the that's the current thing. Was it Neville saying that Isak could go there in the summer? Come on, we're
yeah, I mean,
leagues apart these days.
he started off by saying Real Madrid and then name dropped, I think Liverpool was in. You go, it's not going to happen, but okay, it's not beyond the possibility of it happening. And then it was like Manchester United, and that's when I switched off. I was like, right, okay. But on Barnes, it's really interesting because obviously he would have known that he's got one more game, i.e. the Brentford game, to
Yeah.
maybe impress and lay down a marker. But with Gordon potentially out a little bit longer, I mean, we don't know. We haven't had the results of the scan. It's not looking as bad as first feared. But Barnes has got a real opportunity here because I think it's fair to say that Gordon maybe hasn't hit the heights that we know he can do before he got suspended. Still a very crucial player, massive role in getting Newcastle to the final. But he hadn't blown anyone out of the water, so to speak. I think it was more Harvey Barnes just wasn't taking his opportunities to really be to really compete for that place. But after the performance at West Ham, the performance at Wembley, and hopefully good performance at Brentford, it's not necessarily that Anthony Gordon just walks straight back in on the left, is it?
No, I mean, it depends how severe his bruise is as well, isn't it? Because Tuchel has kind of said it's a really bad bruise, and he was in a lot of pain. Um, But let's not underplay how well Gordon's been. He's had some amazing moments for us this season. You know, look at his goals at Arsenal, for example, with that, you know, amazing Henry-esque celebration, and also that phenomenal cross when he was switched across for Isak's header. Do you remember that one when he swapped sides? I mean, he has had some real standout moments, which really do kind of shine in the memory. If there was a highlights reel of games so far, Anthony Gordon would feature a few times. He has had some big moments, but I get what you're saying. He was Player of the Season last season and had more standout moments. I sort of got the feeling he was getting into his groove. You know what I mean? It took him a while to get started. I think probably the sheer volume of football this lad's had to play and the lack of rest. So, you know, it did take him a while to sort of get firing. He did start cooking, and then there we go. He gets himself suspended, unfortunately. But no, you're right. If Harvey Barnes has a match-winning performance against Brentford, then yeah, and Gordon's fit and ready for it's Leicester afterwards, isn't it? Then no, he doesn't naturally just walk straight back in the team. But thankfully that's a question for Eddie, isn't it? That's a dilemma for him.
And that's a dilemma that Eddie will want to have, and hopefully as time goes on, have that across the entirety of the pitch, where he's got options, and not just options, but he's got players in really good form. And just talking about the man behind Barnes and Tino Livramento, who has been cut from the England squad for the next game. So I imagine he might be coming home a little bit earlier, which I'm sure Eddie Howe won't turn his nose up at. there was a, shall we say, criticisms at West Ham of Livramento, little people pointing out that maybe he's not as good going forward as Lewis Hall, but of course it was not on his favourable side. But the difference between West Ham and that final, unbelievable. I mean, obviously he gets a part in Isak's goal as well. He's going to have to fill in at left back for the rest of the season. Games and performances like that one he had at Wembley will do his confidence the world of good. We've got confidence in him, right? He can play left back until the end of the season at a high level.
Yeah, of course he can. I mean, let's not forget that's what he was doing last season plenty of times as well. You know, he's so versatile. He's such a good player. I totally get what you're saying about his audition, as it were, at West Ham. It did raise a couple of eyebrows, but then he was going up against Jared Bowen, who, when he's on song, is an absolutely brilliant player. I mean, you know, you look at the two toughest lads he could have gone up against, and it is Mo Salah and Jared Bowen. I can't think of anyone harder than the two of them. So actually, I think he had the perfect introduction in that role against Jared Bowen, because Jared was lively. He looked assertive. He looked aggressive, and he didn't get through him. You know, not very often. But I see what you mean about the overlap and stuff. But I think that's the game we needed. We needed that kind of challenge at West Ham. We needed a sort of battling, kind of all in. Also, I think we needed to prove to the fans as well that the lads didn't only have one eye on the final, but were still thinking about getting the 3 points in the league. And I think, you know, those two games back to back really served us so unbelievably well, because it's continued to give us a platform in the Premier League. It makes Champions League something that we can really aspire to get now. What, 10 games left? It's all there for the taking if we keep playing the way we're playing. And then, of course, to win at Wembley, where Tino was 4, 5, 10 scores better than he was at West Ham, where the overlap did. I mean, his cross in for Murphy's header down for Isak's goal. Am I right in saying, because I have watched it back, but it's still like my memory at the time, that was with his left foot, wasn't it? He's a right footer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not easy to do, Andrew. I play very, very poor football, but my weak foot is atrocious. I would fall over it. So for him to put it on a sixpence like that, for Murphy to nod it down and Isak to finish, that's some talent, man.
Yeah, undoubtedly. And I love the fact it was between him and Barnes as well, who had a bit of criticism, like we say, a few days earlier. So for them to play a major role in getting the goal that got Newcastle over the line, I was over the moon that those two played the role they did do. Talk to us about your emotions during the final. Then, you know, when Isak gets that in the back of the net, are you believing that this is our year?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my emotions were absolutely all over the place, Andrew. I was really struggling, if I'm honest with you. Um, Going into the game was very, very. I was very, very excited.
Simple reason that it was Liverpool. I think if we'd been playing any other team, I would have been 100% confident because of what we've done to the other teams, to Arsenal and so on. But Liverpool has been our bogey team for as long as I can remember, and it's been the one team that Eddie has struggled with. You know, and I was at St James's when we had the 3-3 earlier in the season, and I thought we should have won that game. You know, I still remember, and I'm still cross that the referee blew when I felt we had a break on and we could have gone on to win the thing then. But there it is. You know, got to let some of these things go. So we have owed Liverpool one for decades, Andrew. It's not just like for a couple of seasons. We have owed them one for as long as my mind can kind of stretch back. And Liverpool have always been this unbelievable team that you sort of aspire to be, the way everything's kind of done there. So I was really nervous going in, but had this sort of undertone of, so many people had told me that they were confident, quietly confident, that I wasn't going in there thinking, well, we're going to get it handed to us and we're going to really struggle here. I was thinking we'd be in the game. And I always felt that if our lads showed up, I think I messaged this to you when you were kind of messaging me about Box Park and stuff. I think I said to you, if the real Newcastle show up, we're in with a massive chance. And they did show up. And it was brilliant. And honestly, mate, I believe we were going to win it from the moment Dan Burns scored that header. I felt comfortable after about 10 minutes of football. I was like, we're really in this. We are, and I knew we weren't going to get pasted at that point. And then after Dan's header, and then in the end, sort of queuing for the toilets at half time, you know, we were all just black and whites together singing He's From Blythe non-stop, which was absolutely brilliant. And that kind of just carried that wave of excitement and energy, kind of carried you through. But my emotions then in the second half were absolutely all over the place, mate. It wasn't just about believing we'd win the game. It was trying to process what all of that meant. And I was also, you know, I don't know if you felt this as well, but I would have flashes where my phone would suddenly have signal at Wembley. You know, most of the time there was nothing, it was dead. And then I'd suddenly have signal and there'd be like 58 messages on WhatsApp. I couldn't read them because I was focused on the game. But then I did want to include my kids because the thing that I was sort of a bit gutted about were the people I wasn't there with. And there are, you know, those are obviously family members that have passed, like my granddad, for example, who's the main reason why I support Newcastle United. And I thought about him a lot during the game, actually. I really thought about him there. And that was quite emotional for me, without kind of sounding too sort of to whatever the word is. But I also really wanted to include my kids. I got 3 boys who are all huge Newcastle United fans because of me. And, you know, they were before the takeover. They were when Steve Bruce, I felt so guilty as a dad, you know, when Steve Bruce was managing us and the dross we were delivering, but I was still telling the boys they were Newcastle fans and that was that, you know, and yet they were then watching the games going, well, this is it. This is what we're supporting. I was like, yes, it is. And bless them, they all followed my request, and they're all huge Newcastle fans. So there were a couple of moments when I was able to FaceTime them, you know, at the full-time whistle, not during the game, but the full-time whistle, I was able to FaceTime them, especially when we were doing that, you know, when the trophy came down on the pitch, when they went into that green celebration thing where we've seen that, and the fireworks and the flames went off and everything else. And I was FaceTiming them with that in the background, and they obviously had it on in the telly behind them. And that was really lovely for me. And that kind of set me off a bit as well. I had all these emotions going around in my head: joy, shock. Dan Byrne talked about how he was numb on the field. Do you remember? He kind of said, you know, I kind of feel numb. I didn't feel numb, but I felt totally overwhelmed. And I had a bit of an identity crisis, because we're a team that wins. And it was just like, and I'd been saying that at Box Park a couple of times, we want to be a team that wins, but we haven't been, and we weren't. We're a team that almost does every now and again. Occasionally we get a chance. Perhaps we might. You know, I've seen us not win so many times. And I don't just mean cups. I also mean, you know, the Premier League and so on. But I've seen us nearly, but never quite. So it's programmed into us. We're used to kind of nearly getting there. So when Chiesa's goal was allowed in extra time, there was part of me that was just like, oh, of course they've let that go. Of course that's allowed. Oh, here we go. You know, now we've got, and there's all this random extra time added on that none of us could understand, that turned into sort of so many minutes. It was ridiculous. And yeah, after Chiesa's goal stood, then I was going through everything in my head. I was like, they're going to get a fluky goal, then it's going to go to extra time, and then it's going to go to penalties. It's going to be lucky Liverpool once again, la, 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 la. So the fact that we held on and the game management we showed, taking it into the corners and so on. Oh, mate. I mean, I tell you what, the minute we took it into the corner for the first time, I think it was Callum Wilson was over there. I think Tonali went to assist him. Joey Willock was around. That's when I thought, oh, hang on. Maybe we're not going to get a sucker punch. Maybe we are actually going to win this thing. And that was, again, one of the many emotions that was going on. How did you feel, Andrew? Because were you sat in the press box?
Yeah, so I was sat in the press box, and you've got to contain yourself. So I think when Harvey Barnes had that half chance in the first half, and when you look back at it, I mean, it's half chance at best. I did kind of jump up, and then I realised where I was, and then had to kind of, okay, whether you're here in a professional capacity. But then when the goals were going in, you're doing the same thing. You know, you're trying to keep your emotions in check. But I mean, I had gone the first moment when I saw the scarves being twirled before kickoff. I mean, that was what sent me off. And then at full time, I went to go and film the players going up the stairs to get the trophy and then coming back down. And I managed to contain myself. And then we sat down, did a quick piece to camera just as the players were coming back on the pitch. And I mean, everyone that's a regular viewer of the podcast or listener has probably seen the video. I debated whether to put it into the diary, but we decided to do it of me just absolutely tearing up. Like, I couldn't control myself because, like you say, we've seen them be the nearly men so often. You know, against Manchester United a couple of years ago, you just felt a missed opportunity. But this time, I predicted Newcastle to get to the final the moment they were drawn against Arsenal, and the weeks leading up to the final, I said, we're going to win this. We're going to win this. I don't think too many people were of the same train of thought, but I was confident. And even when they got that goal late on, I just felt like the game management had been spot on throughout. I wasn't worried. I wasn't concerned. And like you say, they go to the corner and all that. I was confident they were going to do it. And I spoke to Graham Jones afterwards, and he said, we knew that there might have to be that opportunity of game management, and look how well we saw it out. And he was buzzing, and he was just very full of praise for everyone who'd worked so hard to see the game out. And what a tremendous, absolutely tremendous. And I managed to sort my dad a ticket out at the last minute as well.
Oh, wow.
And he just texted me full time saying, thank you. And that was it. And that spoke volumes, and he was tearing up, and it was just unbelievable. What a fantastic weekend it was. And yeah, it still doesn't seem real. Has it sunk in for you?
No, it really hasn't. And I have watched it back, and I've watched the full game back twice. I've watched the post match, because this is the other thing, is I recorded it on both channels, right? It was on ITV and on Sky Sports, so I had both set to record. Turns out ITV was the same. It was the same coverage, but I didn't know that at the time, because I basically recorded both because I wanted to make sure that whichever one was the one I kept was the one with the best Newcastle pundit. Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes it's not as balanced as it should be on the coverage. Anyway, it is what it is. I recorded both, and there was that extended one on Sky Sports, which I think went on for an extra hour for all the celebrations and I've watched just the kind of after the final whistle bit blown. I've seen the trophy lift and all the kind of on-field interviews. I mean, more times than I can remember, and my wife, bless her, she's absolutely fine with it. She's seen me watch it so many times. She's now at the point where she's just chuckling. Because the other thing is, all three of my lads will just sit and watch it with me now. We're almost at the point where we're quoting what the commentators are saying and what Big Dan's saying, and Eddie's interview as well, which was very telling, by the way, talking about how they planned and hidden certain things ahead of playing Liverpool in the Premier League and so on. So, no, mate, it still doesn't seem real. It doesn't seem real, but I'm so pleased it is.
Yeah, well, not to ask too personal of a question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Has your wife asked you the question of where it ranks in your happiest days? Because my wife is on my case, and I've had to say to her, look, across all of the coverage, I've never actually said it was the best day of my life because, I've had a child. I've got married to you, my wonderful wife. It was a beautiful weekend. But I'm not going to get myself into trouble by maybe telling my full feelings. If you're watching, Lily, it's not the best day of my life. It was up there, though. Have you had to face those questions?
I've been quite diplomatic, Andrew. I have simply described it as top 5 because, of course, I have 3 kids and a wedding day, and I mean, it's like when your kids ask you, what's the best day of your life? Well, you can't say when the first one was born, but not the second or not the third. They all have to be level, right? So therefore, if they're all level, then it's okay to include getting married, and therefore it's okay to include that one, right? It's okay to include the first cup win I have ever seen. It's okay to include Newcastle being absolutely brilliant and amazing and doing all the things we've been desperate for them to do for the long time that I've lived on this planet. It's okay to have that. So it's top 5, but all 5 are going to be equal. That's what I'm saying, even if because it's the most recent, it's obviously the most apparent and the one I'm still glowing from it, man. I also had a little crash at the end of last week. It kind of Thursday, Friday, I was a little bit exhausted. Do you know what I mean? I was just sort of felt really shattered with the whole thing and really sore cheeks from constantly grinning. But also the amount of, you must have had this, the amount of extra sort of editing and content that we had to turn out because of the win. Suddenly we were having to pull extra late nights to get a Box Park Live bit up that we weren't expecting to do, and all these extra things. So Thursday, Friday, I was a little bit like, whoa, but I'm riding the high again, mate. I sort of feel I've lifted again since the weekend. I'm up again because I keep thinking about it. I keep bursting into extreme happiness. I keep hearing from friends and loved ones and friends that I have made, that I would only make because of Newcastle United. Like where we were stood, or sat, sorry, we're supposed to say sat, but I was stood the whole match. I'm sure. Well, you weren't because you had to sit down because of where you were, but the rest of us we were stood the whole time. Come on. And I was stood next to a couple of people I'd never met before. It was a father and son. The son must have been kind of late teens, early 20s. The dad probably, early 40s. And chatting away to them before the game, knowing how much it meant to all of them. But there was a lovely moment in the middle. It was just before Dan Burn scored. And the father said to his son, I think we're going to do this, son. And if we do, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I'm going to pass out. I don't know if I'm going to soil myself. I don't know if I'm going to cry. But whatever it is, it'll be amazing. And I'm so glad I'm doing it with you. And I just felt like, and he kind of looked at me and he went, which do you think you should do? And I said, which do you think I should do? And I said, well, preferably not soil yourself, because I think that would be a little awkward for all of us. But if you've got to do it, you've got to do it. And then when we were winning and when we were scoring and all the rest of it, I was part of their little trio. We were just kind of bouncing around. It was limbs everywhere, plus the people in front of us and behind us. And, you were hugging everyone constantly, basically. It was brilliant. That was amazing.
Yeah, so many memories. And I was all right. I kind of, the emotion and the tears had stopped until I saw, it was a few days ago, Newcastle released a new video on their YouTube channel. And
was it Match Cam by any chance? Because that got me big time.
Because they put little piano music over it, and I was like, you know exactly what you're doing here. And I just went again, and my wife was like, not again. I was like, I can't help it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
her dad's a Villa fan, so he doesn't understand success. But yeah, the club have put out some belter content. There's been some great content across the entirety of social media, and I'm not bored of watching it yet, and I don't think I will be for many months to come. We've got a load of people in the comments enjoying the show. Shez says, spot on about the identity crisis. I was confused for 2 days after the win. Didn't know what to feel. Just felt overwhelmed and raw. Roger says, I'm the same, Andy. It hasn't sunk in properly. A lot of people on the same kind of train of thought there about it. Just not feeling real just yet. And we've got Rana tuning in from Hong Kong. Thank you very much for doing so. On to the Newcastle United Women, because they beat Sunderland yesterday at St James's Park in front of a record attendance, 38,502 people, which is a record crowd for a championship game, more than double the previous record, which was at the Stadium of Light for Sunderland versus Newcastle. That was 15,387. I mean, first off, just on the attendance, we know Newcastle United Women are supported hugely up here. Kingston Park is nearly always at capacity. They've got so much support, as we say, from the terraces, but great to see those numbers at St James's Park.
Absolutely. Honestly, it filled me with pride when I saw that. And I know there was some jeopardy to it as well, Andrew, because the previous record was obviously held by the Stadium of Light, although the caveat to that is that it was held by the Stadium of Light at the reverse fixture. So plenty of those fans would have been Newcastle fans. You know what I mean? So we helped them have a record, which kind of didn't necessarily feel right. So to then absolutely obliterate that record, I think I saw something. And again, with social media, you got to, I can't guarantee this was correct, Andrew. You're the journalist. You'll be able to check the numbers. But I believe we had more fans at the Lasses game than Sunderland did for their last home match in the championship for the men's team.
Yeah, I saw that doing the rounds. Let me just check it out before we get some angry Sunderland fans telling us that we are promoting fake news. But I suspect it might be right. So I'm just going to check it out. But yeah, I just love the fact that obviously Mana Staveley came in. She really wanted to focus on this project, and now she's moved on. But the club are still backing it, still backing Becky Langley, some really big investment in recent transfer windows, and they just look like a really good outfit. Promotion to the next year might be a little bit out of their reach this season, but they've got some excellent players and a real strong foundation to build on as well.
Yeah, don't rule them out for promotion yet, Andrew. I mean, I was very, very sort of privileged to do an episode with the Lasses for Adopted Geordies, which was a few episodes ago. And I tell you what, they are a formidable group. I watched them train back in January, and there's some real talent on that pitch. And then to get to chat to three of them was just amazing. We had Beth Lumsden on, the Mackham Slayer, who obviously scored the two at the Stadium of Light, which was brilliant for her. She called herself an Adopted Jordy, so of course I loved that. Amber Keevan-Stobbs being the captain, and just what a role model. She is utterly phenomenal. I've become a huge fanboy of Amber's. In fact, if I'm right, I thought I heard during the game yesterday. I thought I heard Amber, ole, ole, ole. Did you catch that? I'm sure I caught it, which is so rightly deserved.
Yeah, it's so thoroughly deserved, and you know, she goes to all the men's home games as well because she wants to kind of be involved and learn and take stuff in as well. And then she's off to training, or she's just come from training. She's so committed to her role at the club, and she's a fantastic captain as well. So I'm sure she's over the moon to lead them to a victory over Sunderland.
Yeah, and I tell you what, a couple of side stories that I want to check with you, if that's all right, Andrew, because like I say, not a journalist, therefore can't be sure. But am I right in saying that the Sunderland manager is Alan Shearer's cousin? Is that correct?
I'm not even going to begin to pretend I know the answer to that, but that is some family tree, if that is the case.
Isn't that incredible? If that turns out to be real, I think that's an astonishing kind of subplot that maybe is worth exploring at some point, because that's just an amazing story. But the other one, which I reckon you will be able to confirm, because my stream was a little bit patchy at the end. Did Becky Langley get sent off at the very end? What was that? What for?
I've got no idea, but it was a clearly very passionate and stressful afternoon for both. But yeah, she did get sent off towards the end. The goal came from Shania Hales. And you can see the emotion, and there's a picture at full time, and she's just in tears. And you know, for most of the ladies playing, you know, they would never have played in front of this type of crowd before, these numbers, and then to score the winner as well. I mean, she will just be flying high after a fantastic Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, amazing. And she came on as a substitute, didn't she? She didn't start the game. So to come on and have that impact, I mean, that's, you know, credit to Becky Langley as well for reading the game so well and saying, look, this needs a touch of Shania magic, because she did. She came on and she was superb. But I thought we won it in midfield, Andrew. You know, our midfield was really, really solid, really strong. Plus, of course, the support was absolutely amazing. Do you see there was one Sunderland fan that managed to get themselves arrested during the game?
I saw a clip of a Sunderland fan running across the concourses and going after a few of the flags. So you know, they seem to have fun anyway. But yeah, a tremendous result for the women, and just again a tremendous attendance, and long may that continue with more games being played at St James's Park. The cup was paraded on the pitch as well, which it initially created a little bit of controversy, and I couldn't understand it because the clue is in the name. It's Newcastle United. You know, why not go and parade it on the pitch with Bob Moncur, the last captain, to lift a major piece of silverware until Bruno managed to do it? Why not allow Darren Eales that moment as well to lift it in front of 38,500 people? Like, we're all in this together, whether it's a women's side, whether it's the men's side, and the motivation and inspiration that will give youngsters in the crowd who unfortunately will not get to men's games because of the demand for tickets. So they're here at St James's Park, enjoying the day out, watching the women beat Sunderland, and then to see the cup lifted. I could not understand at all why people were kicking off about it. I thought it was the right thing to do, and I'm glad it went down as well as it did.
I wasn't aware that people had kicked off about it, Andrew. I mean, that seems a strange thing to me. You've got to be fairly cold-hearted to deny Bob Moncur and Darren Eales, a man who's fighting a rare kind of blood cancer, their opportunity to lift the cup in front of such an ardent fan base. I mean, that seems a little harsh to sort of deny them that. But the fact of the matter is, it's our cup. Let's lift it all the time. Let's have it everywhere. You know what I mean? Let's just celebrate it continually and constantly. It doesn't just have to be with the lads that won it on the field. Like you've said, the word is united, you know, so let's have it in Phoenix. Let's have it in the Stack. Let's put it everywhere. Let's let everyone see it all the time, because it's ours and it's brilliant. So yeah, I'm all for it, mate. Let's just keep showing it. Keep getting as many different people connected to the club as possible to lift it up in as many places as we can. Let's just do it.
Every single Greg's in the city centre, you'll be there till Christmas.
Yeah, why not?
And just finally then, before I ask you a couple of questions that have been sent in, obviously there is a trophy parade / trophy event this Saturday on the Town Moor. A lot of people unhappy that, as for the moment while we record and go out live, there hasn't been a bus parade announced. look, it's one of those things where it's going to be tight to turn around. It's such short notice. I'm sure in an ideal world, every single authority involved in this would have the bus parade, because it's the memories that I remember. 1998, 1999, watching the players come back from Wembley, my dad throwing us on top of a traffic light just to get a glimpse of them. That's what I remember growing up as a kid, and it does stay with you. I mean, first and foremost, your thoughts. I mean, again, ideal world, if it was possible, it would have to be a bus parade, right?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, the fact is, Andrew, we aren't armed with the information about what's happening yet, really. I mean, we know that there's been register interest for this event in the town walls, and like loads of fans, I've done that for me and mine. But we don't know if it's going to be a bus parade beforehand. I mean, maybe it is. We don't know yet. I hope it is. Like you, I hope it is, because it's iconic, isn't it? It's something I think that allows everybody to just come out of their shop, come out of their house, whatever it might be, line the streets and give them a cheer and a wave, and, fantastic. And if it happens, the club will be doing their level best to make it happen. But some things aren't under the club's control, right? I mean, they've got to work with the authorities, they've got to work with the police, they've got to work with the council and so on. So I think I assume, and I don't know, I'm not speaking from a position of knowledge, it's just my own opinion, but I would assume that they are still gathering as much information and talking to as many people as possible to see what can be done. The idea that they are choosing not to have an open-top bus parade is, I think, probably nonsense. I would have thought the first thing they thought of is, well, let's have a bus parade, let's do that, and then work back from there. If they manage to do that and put on some kind of amazing show, let's be fair, one of the things we've seen from the sponsor seller is quite spectacular moments. They're good at that, right? They lit up London with that thing on the side of the building the night before, which was super cool, or Friday night or whatever it was. They've done really, really cool things that we've all been excited about. Did it on the flour mill and stuff just a few months ago. So for the kit unveiling and so on, the drone displays, we've seen cool things. So if there's something cool plus bus parade, it's win-win, isn't it?
Oh, certainly so. And like I say, I'm sure that those talks are continuing, and hopefully they come to the conclusion that everybody would like, but they're going to have to get the players to the Town Moor somewhere. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I'm sure, as we say, everyone's working together to try and find the solution that pleases absolutely everybody. We'll finish off then with a couple of questions. We've got Scott saying, I can't help but feel excited about our next transfer window. It will elevate us for sure. So I'm going to hand the power over to you, Andy. Who is your dream summer target for Newcastle United?
Oh,
realistic as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, the thing is, Andrew, that the realistic has changed now because of the cup win. It's something that Ryan Taylor said to me on our celebration episode on the Huddle, on our winners episode. I said to him, and Ryan, what does this do for us now? What does it do for us in terms of players coming in? And his answer was so telling, and I would encourage people to go and listen to it, because Ryan is brilliant the way he reads the game and his passion for the club. But Ryan said, listen, if you're not elite now, don't even mention the idea of coming to Newcastle to your agent. Only elite players should now be being considered, and to think that they would be worthy of playing for Newcastle now. And that just filled me with such pride and excitement. Now, obviously, there's going to be budget issues. We know those 3 horrendous initials that I don't even want to say that we've had to work around, which is why we've had such a quiet three windows. But hopefully we've got a bit of freedom to go and buy 3 or 4, even if it's just 1 or 2 really superb players. But 3 or 4 would be great, wouldn't it? I mean, you've got to think about, where do we need players? And it seems really crass to do this after they've just won the cup, against such a brilliant Liverpool side. So I don't really want to single out a sort of specific person, because I don't want to say, well, they could be upgraded. So it's more about, where is there competition for places? Well, at the moment, because of Miggy's departure, there's no competition with Jacob Murphy, unless you choose to play Ossie on the right, which we've only kind of seen in flashes. Sort of my understanding is Ossie more a sort of striker. I think when he did kind of drift over to the right, he did look quite interesting, but it's not something we've seen Eddie do, especially not consistently. So we do, I think, need another right winger who can provide competition for Jacob Murphy. We know that the centre-backs aren't getting any younger, and Sven Botman obviously has had his injuries, so we probably need another centre-back. And we're constantly being linked with goalkeepers, like left, right and centre. So, I mean, James Trafford's the name that keeps coming up, isn't it? And mate, if we get him, he's an absolutely superb player, if he's an option. But that's not to take away from Nick Pope and Martin Dubravka and Vlachodimos and John Ruddy, who are all cup winners. I mean, that's the thing. We have all been elevated. Every single player now. It's when we were in the Champions League, for example, I sort of thought to myself, do you know what? We now have Champions League players because we've given them that opportunity. It's the dream, isn't it? Before you're in the Champions League, you dream of signing a player with Champions League experience. Well, that was everyone in our squad once we got Champions League. Sean Longstaff is now a Champions League player. Lewis Miley is a Champions League player. This is fantastic stuff because they've got that experience. Well, now everyone in our squad to a man is a winner. And that's that's something to be absolutely delighted by. So to come back to your question, which I have tried to evade, Andrew, and I apologize for that, I would have to say, let's wait and see who leaves. Because there are endless rumours. We hear that Kieran Trippier might be off pretty much every 5 minutes. And yet here he is still playing and rolling back the years at Wembley to be utterly phenomenal. I mean, what a performance from him. So if he goes this time, then we'd need to think about replacing him. If Sean Longstaff goes to one of these clubs that might be interested in him, if Eddie lets him go, then we might need some backup. But who out there, better than I do, Andrew, who gets in our midfield right now over Bruno, Joe Linton and Tonali? Who is it? Who's better out there that can sit in our system better than the three of them? It's not easy to find players that are better than our lads right now.
Yeah, 100%. And it's a compliment to how well they've done. And obviously anyone that comes in has to go up against Lewis Miley as well, who is absolutely superb. And probably the midfield three, if they manage to hold on to everyone, which I think they will do, is probably the area that doesn't need to be really strengthened. And you mentioned the right wing. It'd be good to bring in some competition for Isaac as well. Loads of people in the comments talking about a report in Spain today that says Liverpool are going to break the transfer record to bring Isaac to Anfield. I mean, look, he's not going anywhere. He's under contract. I think Newcastle will do all they can to if not this summer, beyond to offer him a new deal. If he leaves Newcastle United, someone is going to have to pay close to £200 million for him, right?
I can't see him leaving, Andrew. That's only my humble opinion. But why would you go at this point? He has, and also we've had him say this repeatedly whenever people badger him about it. He continually talks up his love of playing here, his love of the area. He's got real long-term friends in the squad, and he is achieving his ambitions. We talked about him wanting to be a winner and wanting to play in the Champions League. Well, he's done both at Newcastle United, whilst being adored by the fans and getting all the great press and having a team that effectively the system is now built around him, right? Where else is he going to go where a system is set up to make sure you are the very best version of yourself? I'm not sure there is a club out there where he'll be as admired and as adored by the fan base and the players he's playing with and the manager who really gets him. There's a real connection there. Plus, the system is set up so that you play your way, mate, and we will get the ball to you. We will feed you however you want it fed. What other team can do that for Alexander Isak right now? I can't think of a team in Europe.
Yeah, spot on. He's the centre. He's the core. You go to Real Madrid, you've got your other stars there. He'd be maybe 6th, 7th in the pecking order when it comes to the so-called stars. And at Newcastle United, he's arguably number one. And fingers crossed he does stay and scores a boatload more of goals as well. Final question then, Andy, before I let you get off. St James's Park. Plenty of discussion, plenty of debate about what the future holds for Newcastle United. So will it be at St James's Park with some sort of expansion, or will they move to a new location, more likely to be Leazes Park than anywhere else? What are your thoughts on the situation?
Oh, it's head and heart, Andrew. This is the big challenge, isn't it? And this is the one you sort of get the feeling that they're leaning towards a new stadium. That's just, again, nothing has been said to me, neither on nor off the record. This is just reading reports from people like your good self and reading the quotes from various people at the club. For me, it's really difficult because St James's Park has been our home for as long as I have been alive, and it's where I have all my memories of being the home team. Although I must say, Wembley felt like we were the home team as well. So that does kind of change the narrative slightly in my head, because ultimately it's the people that make the club, right? And the people filled Wembley, and that became our home for that period. Then the flip side for me is getting tickets. You know, I have 3 lads. We're all members, and we are never particularly successful in the ballots. It's hard to get in, and you want to be able to see your team as often as possible, and you want to be able to get tickets easily without having to, sometimes it's like winning the lottery. So it's hard to know if the idea for me, the perfect situation would be to keep St James's Park and somehow have some revolutionary way of making it like 75, 80,000 capacity. But I'm not sure that's physically possible. Therefore, I don't know, my heart would love to stay at St James's Park. My head is like, if we moved, so long as it is still city centre, and if you're saying it's going to be Leazes Park, then it's still right there. You know, we still have all the businesses around. We still have the places where people go for their pre-match and post-match. You still have the buzz, the excitement, and so on. And then if it just houses more of us, then that does sound good. I mean, I must admit, I went to Tottenham Stadium for our match back in January, and I know there are some doubters to it, some people that sort of think that it's a bit soulless. But I'll tell you what, mate, the noise in there was really impressive, and the view, but all the stuff behind the scenes as well. You know, all the bits, the concourse and the place where you get your food and your drink and so on. It's impressive. It's really great. If we could upgrade St James's to have that would be awesome. That would be really great. But I have such fondness and love for St James's. So I find it a bit of a struggle to mentally go elsewhere. And I've kind of watched what the Everton fans have been going through in the last few days. Didn't they open one for like an under-21s match? And I don't think it's had the greatest of responses from locals there. That I think are regretting leaving Goodison. And also their capacity is like, for the new place, is like 50,000, isn't it? So it's not even like they've made a mega bowl. So I don't know, where do you see it on, Andrew? What do you feel? Do you want a new stadium, or do you want to stay at St James's?
I think in an ideal world, you stay at St James's and you expand, but you just look at the obstacles that they're going to have to go through to do that, with whether it be listed buildings or the road. It just doesn't look like it's going to be doable, and if it is doable, it's going to be massively expensive. So I think the PIF have been very clear that, whatever happens has to be cost effective. They're not just going to throw money at it and make a loss. So if it means paying a little bit more and getting 20,000-30,000 more seats at a new location in the city centre, which is absolutely key, you're spot on, then I think that's probably the right way to go. I think in the world of FFP and PSR and any other initials you want to throw out, you have to have a home that is more than football. It's important it doesn't lose the soul, but it has to be able to do concerts and American football perhaps and other events. You look at the Spurs Stadium, for example, where it's bringing in more revenue than just match days. So I'm leaning towards moving as long as it's in the city centre. But there's something you said that is really important, because a lot of people have said, you're going to move to a soulless bowl. The atmosphere is going to be impacted. But Wembley showed, when everyone pulling together, exactly what the fans can do. And you are spot on. It's about the people. And it doesn't matter where you're playing. Long as the people are united and singing the same message, then whatever Newcastle United call home, it will be a fierce place for people to visit, for other teams to come and play. And that's the key. It's up to the fans to make sure that wherever home is for the next 100 odd years, that we make it as fierce and as scary as St James's Park has been for decades.
I hear you. Yeah. Well, I mean, and we will. We'll bring the atmosphere. But yeah, it's bittersweet because time doesn't stand still, and perhaps we're sort of being led to understand that the real way to cater to the fan base and make the sort of money that we need to be making off the field in this new wave of football, which is all about where the funds come from. Perhaps we need a bigger stadium. Perhaps that has to be a new one. But it will be a sad day when we leave St James's, mate. Even if the new place is unbelievable, I'll still feel pretty upset on that last day. I think it'll be a hard one to say goodbye to.
Yeah, certainly. So you, me, and everyone watching and listening. Well, Andy, thank you very much for popping on to the Monday show. It's been a great pleasure to chat to you. I'm just going to sign off on this tweet that's come in. David says, sorry that I missed the Monday show. Full of emotion last week, but nice to see two of my favourite podcasts together. I'm also an adopted Jordy, and I thought that was a lovely message there.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Andrew, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. I've been honoured that you asked me on. So thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. To you guys watching and listening, you know what to do. Hit thumbs up, hit subscribe, get into the comments, leave us a rating and a review. Make sure you get your tickets to see Ryan Taylor and James Perch in a special Q&A this Thursday. And for myself and Andy, we'll see you guys very soon.